Hi everyone, Larissa here. We're going to chat a little bit about planks, which is our focus of the month. We've got so many different versions of planks. We're going to focus specifically on side plank today, but it does actually help us with our regular high plank to low plank. Essentially, we have a little bit of wrist compression that can happen, especially in something like a side plank. And very often, we place our hand, we pop our legs up, and here's the side plank. We just kind of land there. I want to give a couple of tips for how to adjust a couple of different things. We've got all the leg variations, one leg up, one knee down, all of that. But specifically, I want to look at wrist, shoulder, making some softness in the wrist itself, because if you landing here like this, it can be a lot of weight pushing down into your wrist itself. So first little tip is finding just enough softness in that bottom elbow that you can actually move your shoulder back, so that when we're going into that side plank, we're not ending up like this, which can put a little undue pressure on the shoulder joint and then on the wrist. So something as simple as noticing your shoulder blades, drawing them together, and that helps to have a soft bottom elbow in order to move the shoulder blades together. Once you're there, you can re-straighten that bottom arm. So that's one little detail to pay attention to in the side plank. There's certainly core stability, but the shoulders themselves, if you go into it rounded, you're going to eventually put a little bit of undue pressure on these two joints here. So tip number one. Tip number two is to pay attention to the placement of your hand. A lot of times we talk about stacking joints, which is super helpful. When you're in doubt, stack your joints. It's going to give you the most amount of stability. Great place to start. In something like side plank, if I were to stack my joints, and I'm trying to look at wrist, elbow, shoulder, I'm in something like this. This side plank works really well. You can also play with, instead of stacking, moving your bottom hand a couple of inches away from you. So instead of trying to stack, I'm actually going to move my hand forward a couple of inches. It was about 4 inches in front of the stack. So now I'm in a slight angle in this side plank, but when I come up, it actually is not an angle. When I'm in that traditional joints stacked, I'm actually a little bit low, and that is going to put more pressure on the wrist itself. So the visual again, if my hand is stacked, I'm in this little bit of a low position, which is not bad. Some people prefer that. For some folks, moving your hand away from you puts you into more of that stacked position. So that's something to play with. A lot of times we go from high plank into side plank. So playing with, it's like, okay, I'm in a pretty stacked position. I'm going to leave my hand there and open up, or I'm going to move my hand a little further away from me and then open up into that side plank. So again, just that visual is hopefully help you to give a couple of different options, but recognizing that there isn't any one right placement. There's lots of different options for our bodies. Something as simple as moving your hands a couple of inches gives your wrist, your shoulder a little bit more stability. Final thing here is a block can be really, really helpful. So if you find when you're in that very flexed wrist position, if that puts pressure on your wrist, if you feel discomfort in the pad of your thumb, anything like that, trying to take that angle out is helpful. One way to do it is to come up onto your knuckle pads. So you might take this position with your hand, going into side plank, something like that. That takes the angle completely out of your wrist. It's a great way to strengthen your fingers as well. So another way to do that is to actually place a block underneath your hand. For some folks, that gives you a little bit more surface area to spread your fingers, maybe even gripping the block. And just that height differential for a lot of folks is going to take some of that angle out of the wrist itself. So just a couple of tips to play with. The biggest thing that I really want to highlight is that there isn't a wrong way to take a pose unless it doesn't feel good for you. That's the only time that I'll say, go ahead and back off, let's figure out a different way to do it. So there's no one correct way to do side plank. Hopefully you got a couple of tips out of there. Hand placement, really paying attention to your wrist, making sure that your shoulders are strong, chest nice and open. So when we open up into those plank positions, we're in an optimal position rather than trying to force our body into something that feels uncomfortable. Take those tips, play with them. Of course, if you have any questions, let us know.